Okay, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're bridging the kind of fascinating psychology of crisis behavior with the highly tangible, critical steps of survival preparedness. I mean, think back to the early days of the pandemic, right? The completely empty shelves, the frantic news reports, we all saw those images. But what if the story we were told about human nature in a crisis was fundamentally wrong? So today we're going to tear down the myth of the hysterical consumer, and then we're going to channel that totally rational instinct for preparedness into literally the single most important survival skill you can master: securing your emergency water supply.
So we're starting off with a little cognitive dissonance here, because despite what the media showed you on a 24-hour loop, panic buying might actually just be a harmful myth. It's a label that got slapped onto a really complex situation, basically making us believe our neighbors were totally losing their minds. But the actual data, it paints a very different and honestly much more logical picture of human behavior. Section 1. The Myth of Panic Buying. Deconstructing the psychological narrative of empty shelves.
To really get this, let's look at a fascinating PLOS One study that pretty much challenged everything we thought we knew about human behavior during the start of COVID-19. Researchers basically conducted these in-depth interviews to understand the actual lived experiences of people navigating those bare supermarket aisles, rather than just judging them from afar. And the absolutely crucial takeaway is that researchers found panic buying is a deeply flawed concept. The term itself pathologizes our totally natural, rational instinct to prepare. When people used the word panic, they weren't describing an actual loss of control or like a descent into madness. They were simply describing the reality of product shortages on the shelves or the completely understandable fear of the unknown.
And this perfectly illustrates the disconnect. See, the media fed us this narrative of a stampeding herd, driven by primitive instincts and just a total loss of rationality. But the public's reality was much, much more measured. People were actually making highly logical calculations. They were looking at impending lockdowns and deciding, hey, I'm going to buy a little extra so I can reduce my trips to the supermarket and limit my exposure to a virus. I mean, that's not panic, right? That's just planning. Participant 14 from the study perfectly captures the empathy and social awareness people actually displayed. They explicitly wanted to find a balance between, creating a buffer for their own family, but also leaving enough on the shelf for the next person. That kind of calculated restraint is literally the exact opposite of selfish hoarding.
Section 2. Why shelves actually go empty. The mechanics of scarcity and social learning.
Which brings us to a massive question. If only about 3% of people actually bought excessive amounts of items like pasta, why did the shelves go completely bare? Well, it was a snowball effect driven by something called social learning. Here's how this vicious cycle works. The media broadcasts an image of an empty shelf. You see that, and it naturally generates a completely rational fear of scarcity. Because of that, you decide to buy just one or two extra items. Not a whole cart full, just a little extra, right? But when millions of people make that exact same small, rational adjustment at the exact same time, our modern super fragile just-in-time supply chains just instantly break. Seeing others buy a little extra made it perfectly logical for you to do the exact same thing.
Section 3. Channeling fear into preparedness. Moving from mindset to action.
So, by validating your instinct to prepare, we can actually remove the stigma of panic. You aren't crazy for wanting to be ready for an emergency. In fact, you're smart. We can take that completely rational desire to gather supplies, step out of the chaotic supermarket aisle, and focus it right on your home. And we're going to start with the ultimate survival necessity. Because look, you can go weeks without food, but you can only last a few days without water. Section 4. Sourcing your emergency water. The golden rules of hydration and storage.
Turning to a super comprehensive guide from the Virginia Cooperative Extension, let's start with the basic math. Municipal water supplies can be easily disrupted by floods, hurricanes, or just the power grid going down, so you really need a plan in place right now. The golden rule of water storage is to secure exactly 1 gallon of water, but that is 1 gallon per person and per pet for every single day. That covers your basic drinking hydration, which is about 2 quarts, plus enough for basic hygiene and food preparation.
And the absolute minimum duration you must plan for is a 3-day supply. To put that into perspective, a family of 4 with 1 dog needs 15 gallons of water just to get through a basic 72-hour disruption. Obviously, having more than 3 days is always better, but 3 is your absolute baseline target.
Okay, let's build out your preparedness toolkit with some options here. For long-term peace of mind, commercially bottled water is safe for 1 to 2 years if you leave it unopened. Now, if you're prepping your own containers, use food-grade, BPA-free plastics, add a couple of drops of unscented bleach per gallon, and those will last 6 to 12 months. Short-term,
Just use sanitized pots with lids, which works great for a few days. And here's a pro tip. Keep bottles of water in your freezer. They actually double as ice packs to keep your food cold if the power goes out. Just remember, avoid milk cartons because they don't seal well, and absolutely never rely on water stored in an open bathtub for drinking.
Now, what if a crisis hits without warning and you didn't stash any bottles? Well, your hot water heater is actually a massive reservoir of potable water. We're talking often 40 to 50 gallons, provided you follow these exact safety steps. And the most absolutely crucial step is number 1. If you skip step 1 and drain the water while the heating element is still on, you could quickly burn out your tank or create a serious hazard. So power off first. Follow this sequence and you've basically got a built-in emergency tank.
Section 5. Treating natural water sources. What to do when the tap runs dry.
But what happens if your stored supply runs out, your hot water heater is completely empty, and you have to rely on a stream, a creek, or even melted snow? Well, consuming untreated surface water can make you severely ill. The very first rule is to pick the best possible source. Definitely avoid stagnant pools. But listen, even running water needs help. Before you even think about treating natural water with heat or chemicals, you absolutely must filter out the physical sediment. You can do this using something as simple as a clean paper towel, a cloth, or a coffee filter. If you don't remove the dirt and suspended solids first, your chemical treatments just won't work effectively.
Now, understanding the blind spots of water treatment is crucial, because this is something almost everyone gets wrong. It's really important to know where each method falls short. For instance, boiling water vigorously for 1 to 3 minutes, that is the ultimate gold standard. It kills bacteria, viruses, and even tough parasites like Giardia and Cryptosporidium. But look at chlorine and iodine drops. Sure, they kill viruses, but they will not protect you from Giardia or Crypto. And what about your high-tech 0.3 micron camping filter? Well, it catches the parasites and bacteria, but viruses literally slip right through it. So if you can't boil your water, you often need to combine a physical filter with a chemical treatment to actually be totally safe.
So, to wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this one thought. We've seen that the media's narrative of the crazed, irrational panic buyer is largely just a myth. Preparing yourself isn't giving in to panic, it is submitting to logic. It's simply the most rational thing you can do to protect your family and ease the strain on the system during a crisis. So take that rational instinct, put it into action, and secure that water. What's your next move?